We are in the book of Ruth, and this is just one lesson. And the title of this lesson is The Providence of God. It's just 4 chapters, so one lesson will cover it. And the objective that I'm using here is God saves through His providence. So you might want to make a note of the word providence, and we will talk about that. God saves through His providence. The subject here is humans are saved from hopelessness. Humans are saved from hopelessness. And the key text I'm using here is Ruth chapter 2 and verse 20. The Lord bless him, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. She added, that man is our close relative. He is one of our kinsman redeemer. So think about that phrase, kinsman redeemer, and the book of Ruth will be giving us some information about that. Another key text that I'm using is Ruth chapter 2 and verse 3. So she went out and began to glean in the fields behind the harvesters. And as it turned out, so I just highlighted that phrase, as it turned out. What is that? It so happened that she found herself gleaning in someone's farm. As it turned out, she found herself working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. As it turned out. So the story of Ruth takes place during the times of the Judges. So you're going back into the historical period of the Judges, and Ruth actually is not a separate time from there. She lived during the time of the Judges. And it's nice to be reading the book of Ruth after reading the book of Judges, because this is a light at the end of the tunnel of the Judges period. The book of Ruth shows us a glimmer of hope, not only for Israel, but also for all the nations of the earth. Yes, some hope for people. So chapter 2 and verse 12. May the Lord repay you. The you there is Ruth, the Moabite. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you, that's the Ruth, the foreigner, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. So while the Israelites did evil during the time of the Judges and worshipped idols, a very pleasant story is told of a young girl who gave up everything to worship the true God. This young girl was not even an Israelite. She was a Moabite, a non-Israelite. And the Lord loved her. And as a result, she became the great-grandmother of the greatest king of Israel. But even greater for this Moabite woman is that the promise of the offspring. Genesis 3:15, we always look at that verse. And this offspring will be born through Ruth's family line. She's a Moabite. Now God made a promise to Abraham to give him a land and make him the father of a great nation, of whom we know to be the Israelites. Genesis chapter 12 and verse 2. I will make you, the you there is Abraham. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. But the promise of the offspring was for all the nations, and therefore not limited to Israel. God never made a promise to Abraham for Israel only, but for all nations. We understand this by God's greater promise to Abraham in making him the father of many nations. So Genesis chapter 17 and verse 4, as for me, this is my covenant with you. You will be the father of many nations. And that's quite important for us to know. So Israel's rebellion and idolatry brought on the Lord's curse of a famine in the land of milk and honey. It's their idolatry that God put that famine on there for the land of Israel. In Judges, we see the rebellion of a nation, but in Ruth, we see the faithfulness of individuals and families in the midst of evil. There were individual good people and families that were good among a widespread rebellion and idolatry. And but much more than the faithfulness of individuals, the book of Ruth shows us the providence of God. The providence of God. In other words, God takes care of the situation when humans are really unaware. So if there's something that we are going to learn from this book, that will be a good lesson. There are many things that we are unaware of, but God takes care of it. If you're unaware of something, you're not going to pray for it because you're not aware. And yet God takes care. That's His providence. So let's take a look at chapter 1, a woman from Moab. During the time of the Judges, there was a famine in Israel. And that was because of widespread rebellion against Jehovah. The land produced no crops. It was dried out and parched. They sowed the seed, but they harvested nothing. Their own evil turned the milk and honey land into a desert. A milk and honey land became a desert. So one man by the name of Elimelech decided to take his family away from there and cross the Jordan to a land of Moab just to get some temporary relief from the famine. Elimelech and his family. Elimelech means God is king. While the Israelites refused to believe that. So it was good to have a name that means God is king. But Israel didn't believe that. His wife's name was Naomi, which means sweetness or my delight, which also contradicts the belief of the Israelites. They didn't believe that either. Sweetness or my delight. But due to suffering because of rebellion, they named their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. So Mahlon means sickly because of the curse on the land. And Chilion means wasting away. Now Elimelech, he died in the foreign country of Moab. And while Naomi was still living there, her two sons married Moabite women. And within the space of about 10 years, both her sons died. And she was left with a Moabite daughter-in-law. So Naomi was just left with two daughter-in-laws. Her husband died, and now her two sons died within that short space of time. The fact is that this family was a good family. They were not a bad family. They were a good family. Although they faced hardships and drought, they did not turn away from God. And although they made some bad decisions in life, they were true to the God of Israel. Their sons did not convert to a Moabite religion when they got married to Moabite women. They stayed true to the God of Israel. But the Moabite women converted, these two daughter-in-laws converted from idol worship to the true God of heaven and earth. So this family had a strong belief in the God of Israel. They were not running away from God. So the daughter-in-laws turned to the true God and left the Moabite religions and their idols. But while in Moab, Naomi received news that the Lord has come to the aid of the Israelites by providing food for them on the promised land, so she decided to return. Some good news coming from the land of Israel. God was providing for them. So she told her daughters-in-law to go back to their Moabite families and remarry and avoid being widows for the rest of their lives. My daughter-in-laws, go back, because I'm going to go back to Israel. You need to go back to your families and get married. It takes a time like this to prove if new converts truly submitted to the God of Israel, and it takes times like that to find that out. Did they really submit to the God of Israel, or did they change their religion because they got married? There are many people today that will marry a believer and change the religion, or you marry into another religion and change your religion. So it takes time. It takes a time like this to prove if the new converts, these two daughter-in-laws, truly submitted to the God of Israel, or did they just change the religion because of marriage? What was it? So one of her daughters-in-law went back to her Moabite gods, but the other remained loyal to the God of Israel. Look at verses 15 and 16. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. Go back with her. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where will I go? Or where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. So Ruth was different to the other daughter-in-law. This is what she said. One had a superficial faith, which no one could tell until such a time like this. One walked away. But Ruth proved that her faith in the God of heaven and earth was genuine. Therefore, she chose to stay with Naomi. Orpah was prepared to join the Israelites, but not submit to the God of Israel. Look at verse 10. She said to her, we will go back with you to your people. Full stop. She didn't say that I will believe in the God of Israel. It was the people was the end of the road. I will go back with you to your people. So Orpah did not say, and to your God. But Ruth said, your God will be my God. Much more. Ruth the Moabite used the word God, which means Elohim, which is the Hebrew word is Elohim, which is in reference to the supreme God as creator. So verse 16, chapter 1 and verse 16. But Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, that's the word in Hebrew is Elohim, not Jehovah. Your God will be my God. She was a Moabite. She wasn't an Israelite. So she wasn't using the name Jehovah. She eventually learned the name Jehovah. But all the nations of the world knew God as Elohim. So your God, my God. But Naomi, the Israelites, used the name Yahweh. She was an Israelite. Yahweh means the eternal, which is God's covenant name for the nation of Israel. It's the reason why Gentile nations never used the name Yahweh. It wasn't God's covenant name for any other nation but the nation of Israel. So Ruth put both names, Elohim, which is used by Gentiles, and Yahweh, or Jehovah, used by the Israelites. Ruth put both those names together to show that the God of Israel is the same God of heaven and earth. And therefore you can look at verses 16 and 17. Verse 17 says, where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord, so we have the word Lord in uppercase, the whole word. And translators have done us a favor by doing that to help us understand that this word is the word Yahweh in the Hebrew Bible. So here is Ruth using the word Yahweh. In verse 17, in verse 16 she said Elohim. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you from me. May the Lord, may Yahweh. That's what she was saying. Therefore she clung to Naomi and traveled back with her to the promised land. Ruth's knowledge of God is what determined her choices. What did she know about this God of Israel? And that's what kept her true to the God of Israel. Let's take a look at a man from Israel. We saw a woman from Moab. Now let's look at a man from Israel. Chapter 2. Naomi and Ruth arrived in Bethlehem, but to a fruitless property, because no one planted in Elimelech's land. It was fruitless. They came back to their farm, but they were not there, so they didn't plant. This means they were poor in spite of being on a fertile land, coming back to a fertile land. Remember, from the planting season to harvest, it takes about 5 to 6 months. You could refer to the Jewish calendar of how the Israelites farmed the land, according to the calendar and the seasons. You can find these Jewish calendars in some Bible handbooks. So, being poor, Ruth decided to glean behind some harvesters on someone else's field, picking up what fell from those people's hands. She just gleaned, picking up the leftovers. Considering how lawless and chaotic Israel was during the Judges period, it would be very dangerous for a young foreign girl looking for food on a strange farm. She found some Israelite servants and gleaned behind those servants. She considered herself to be below an Israelite servant. Chapter 2 and verse 13. May I continue to find favor in your eyes, my Lord, she said. You have given me comfort and have spoken kindly to your servant. Though I do not have the standing of one of your servant girls, I'm not as good as one of your servants. We must remember that Ruth chose to be in this situation. It was her choice. She didn't have to be in this situation. But why did she make such a choice? Naomi left a famined Israelite land and went to a fertile country in Moab. But Ruth left a fertile Moab and chose to be poor in a foreign country. Why did she do that? It was a knowledge of God that gave her the desire to be loyal to Him no matter what. It's a loyalty to God. So Ruth was picking up the leftovers, and the landowner arrived and he noticed her. So to her surprise, he was kind to her. Verse 10. At this she bowed down with her face to the ground. She exclaimed, "Why have I found favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" So in the midst of an evil society, and we know how evil the land was at that time, in the midst of an evil society, here was a good man. And considering the dangerous times that they were living in, Boaz protected her by telling her to stay in his field. Don't go to another field, stay in my field. Look at chapter 2 and verses 8 and 9. And we'll look at verse 22 as well. So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with my servant girls. Watch the field where the men are harvesting, and follow along after the girls. I have told the men not to touch you." So even though there were good people that worked for Boaz, he was still on the alert. "I told the men not to touch you. And whenever you are thirsty, go and get a drink from the water jars the men have filled." Verse 22. Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, "It will be good for you, my daughter, to go with these girls, because in someone else's field you might be harmed. So you understand, they were living in dangerous times. Israel had not changed. This is the dangerous times of the judges. A foreign girl. In someone else's field you might be armed. Why would Boaz protect and provide security for a foreign Moabite girl? It's obvious that Israel was a dangerous place to live in. Although Boaz had good people working for him, he still took every precaution. And that's what we read in verse 9. I told the men not to touch you. Stay with the girls. Protective. Security. Ruth was very thankful to Boaz for his kindness. And when Ruth got home that day, she told Naomi, a mother-in-law, that she gleaned in the field that belonged to a man by the name of Boaz. When Naomi heard this, she expressed thankfulness to the Lord. Verse 20, the Lord bless him, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. He has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. She added, that man is our close relative. Ruth didn't know this. Naomi says, this man is our close relative. He is one of our kinsman redeemers. She first thought that God was punishing her. That's what Naomi thought. God is punishing me. But now she realized that God was not punishing her. Ruth chapter 1 and verse 13 and 21 and 22, and then we look at 2:20 again. Verse 13 of chapter 1. Would you wait until you grow up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me. This is Naomi speaking. The Lord's hand has gone out against me. Verse 21. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. That's what Naomi thought. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabitess, a daughter-in-law, in arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. Now look at chapter 2 and verse 20. The Lord bless him, Naomi said to her daughter-in-law. He has not stopped showing kindness to the living and the dead. She changed her view now of God. God has not stopped showing kindness to me. So Naomi's limited understanding did not alter God's providence, the providence of God. Because Naomi thought, oh, well, the Lord is punishing me. No, that did not alter what God was doing. Chapter 2 and verse 3. So she went out and began to glean in the fields behind the harvesters. As it turned out, so unbeknown to any one of them, as it turned out, she found herself working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. All things work for the good to them that love the Lord. Romans chapter 8 and verse 28, just a quick glimpse into the New Testament. We know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him. So God rules and sustains even when humans are unaware of what is going on. Some believe that God will only bless when they fast and pray. But they need to realize that God blesses even when they are unaware of the situation. We know about dangers. We'll pray. We'll fast about it. But if you don't know, God still takes care of the situation, and that is God's providence. That's what's called God's providence. Boaz was a kinsman redeemer, and Ruth found herself working in his field. Who planned this? No one. God knew what He was doing. Ruth found herself working in a field belonging to Boaz. She didn't know he was a relative of Naomi. Was that by chance? or by God's providence. Naomi remembered the law. That's why I say this was a good family. Elimelech's family was a good family. Naomi knew the law. She knew the scriptures. Naomi remembered the law concerning the kinsman redeemer. She knew about that, which meant the hope of a new life. What does a kinsman redeemer mean? The hope of a new life. But without claiming lawful rights, she submitted to the mercy of the kinsman redeemer. She didn't just jump out there, oh, this is what the law says, you need to save us, Boaz. No, she didn't. The law of the kinsman redeemer was to save a family from losing their family name and their property on the promised land. So we need to know the law, right? You need to know the Mosaic law. So let's step back into the Pentateuch. Leviticus, and we'll look at Deuteronomy as well. So Leviticus chapter 25 and verses 25 to 28. If one of your countrymen becomes poor and sells some of his property, his nearest relative, that's a kinsman redeemer, his nearest relative is to come and redeem what his countryman has sold. If, however, the man has no one to redeem it for him, but he himself prospers and acquires sufficient means to redeem it, he is to determine the value of the years since he sold it and refund the balance to the man to whom he sold it. He can then go back to his own property. Okay, there's some accounting to do here. He goes back to his own property. But if he does not acquire the means to repay him, what he sold will remain in the possession of the buyer until the year of Jubilee. So you should know this. I'm not going to teach you about the year of Jubilee and how that works. It will return to the person in the year of Jubilee, and he can then go back to his property. Let's take a look at Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 5 and 6. If brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, why is it important for them to have a son? Well, it's because he would be the owner of the property. But if one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. A husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. So a first son that she bears will carry the name of the dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. And let me add, they won't lose the property. Now, if Ruth had not returned with Naomi, Elimelech's name would have been wiped out and the family property would have been lost forever, because there's no son. That would be the end of Elimelech and his family and his property. But Ruth returned back with Naomi. You see, now there's the difference. Ruth did not know or understand anything about an Israelite Mosaic law or anything about a kinsman redeemer law. This is the God of providence in the middle of rebellion and anarchy within the nation. Now, if the kinsman redeemer chooses to buy the property and marry Ruth, their first son will carry the family name. In other words, the first son will carry not the name of Boaz, but the name of Elimelech. And the property stays in the family of Elimelech. So you see the value of a kinsman redeemer? God rules over the affairs of men, and he is not limited to human limitations. So humans may be unaware, but God still takes care of the situation. He is able to care for the living and the dead, even though people may not be aware of what is going on. And that is what's called God's providence. Naomi was uncertain of how this was going to turn out. She thought the Lord had rejected her. But she was surprised that he didn't. Yet God was doing something that she was unaware of. He knows everything and governs everything for His own good purpose. God is doing something with this family. Chapter 3, Hope through the kinsman redeemer. So Naomi wanted Ruth to settle down with her husband and build a home, and she thought of no one better than Boaz, the kinsman redeemer. Wow, a good matchmaker, right? She thought there would be no one better than Boaz to be a husband for Naomi. Boaz was a respectable person. Chapter 2 and verse 1. Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side from the clan of Elimelech, a man of standing, whose name was Boaz. He was a good man. And Ruth also gained the respect of all. Chapter 3 in verses 10 and 11. The Lord bless you, my daughter, he replied. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. So she was a good woman. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all that you ask. All my fellow townsmen know that you are a woman of noble character. It was Ruth, the Moabite. So Naomi guided Ruth as to how to approach Boaz in a very modest way. You know the story, so I'm not going to tell you the story. These two were perfect for each other. Ruth proved to be a woman of noble character, and Boaz proved to be different from the evil society of his time. Evil was widespread, but Boaz was a good man. While the Israelites generally ignored the word of God, Boaz remained knowledgeable of the scriptures. So here was a man who knew the scriptures, just like Naomi knew the scriptures. It's an unusual Israelite. And Boaz remained loyal to God. He was loyal to God. Chapter 3 and verses 12 and 13. Although it is true that I am a near of kin, there is a kinsman redeemer nearer than I. He was a man that was absolutely honest. So he said, stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem, good, let him redeem. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie down here until morning. So Boaz was not the nearest kinsman redeemer. There was one nearer than him. But he knew the law and he was going to obey the law. This is what made Boaz different from others, from many others. He knew the law and he obeyed it. And his kindness, Boaz's kindness, glorified God's righteousness. Boaz did not make his own rules, but followed the Lord's requirements carefully. During the time of the judges, you remember that phrase, each man did as he saw fit in his own eyes. Boaz was different. He did not follow the trend of the day. So going back to the book of Judges, chapter 21, verse 25. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as he saw fit, but not Boaz. There was widespread anarchy in Israel. So there was a kinsman redeemer closer than Boaz, to whom he yielded to, according to the law. In the middle of a chaotic nation, Boaz stayed true to the Lord's leadership. Even Naomi knew that Boaz was a God-fearing man. Naomi says, this is my relative. I know him. He's a God-fearing man. Chapter 3 and verse 18. Then Naomi said, wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens. The man will not rest until the matter is settled today. So she knew Boaz. She knew he was a good man. Let's look at chapter 4. The light of life through the offspring. the light of life through the offspring. Through Ruth and the kinsman redeemer, Naomi was able to see the light of life. How did that happen? The other kinsman redeemer, the one that is closer, followed the law only if it benefited him. He was going to marry Ruth only if it benefited him. But he was a selfish man. It didn't benefit him because the first son was going to take the property. That's according to the law of the kinsman redeemer. So this kinsman redeemer, he was a selfish man, typical of the times of the judges period. His motive to buy the property was for selfish gain and not to save his fellow Israelites. When he was told the property will not belong to him, he turned down the sale. He turned the deal down. So selfishness characterized the Israelites at that time. Selfishness. And when the first kinsman redeemer refused to buy, Boaz took the opportunity to redeem. Aren't you glad it worked out that way? And the women gave glory to God and said to Naomi that the Lord has not left her without a kinsman redeemer. Chapter 4 and verse 14, the women said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel." The property would belong to the first son who would carry the family name. And that's how the inheritance remains within the family of Elimelech. So Boaz respected the Lord, obeyed the scriptures, cared for his servants, and helped his fellow citizens. He did all this. Here was an individual going against the trend of rebellious Israel. He was going against the trend of his day. Respecting God leads to a selfless lifestyle. If anyone respects God, they will live a selfless lifestyle, not a selfish lifestyle. Anyone who lives a selfish lifestyle does not know God. And the elders blessed the offspring of Boaz and Ruth before the child was even born. They blessed the offspring of Ruth and Boaz. Chapter 4 and verses 11 and 12. Then the elders and all those at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman," this woman was Ruth, a Moabite, who is coming into your home, like Rachel and Leah, who together built the house of Israel. May you have standing in Ephratah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman. May your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. So you have to go back to the book of Genesis to get that story. Then the woman blessed Naomi with longevity of life. So it was not the end of the road or end of life for Naomi. But listen to how the woman blessed Naomi with longevity of life. Chapter 4 and verse 15. He will renew your life and sustain you. Those are not words you use for someone that doesn't have a son. It will be the end of life for them. But listen to this. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth. When Naomi thought that life was over, she started to realize that with God, it is just beginning. She thought it was over, but with God, it was just beginning. Verse 16 and 17. Then Naomi took the child, laid him in her lap, and cared for him. The woman living there said, "Naomi has a son." And they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. And that is the providence of God. It's quite amazing. She was transformed. Obed means worshipper. The birth of a child brought hope and transformation not only to the family of Elimelech, but also to a Moabite girl. It's amazing. So, in conclusion, what can we say? We ask God for what we want, but He gives us better than what we ask for. Naomi received more than what she imagined God could give her. From this poor yet righteous family, God was going to bless them in a way unknown to them. Ruth the Moabite became a great-grandmother of David, Israel's greatest king. A Moabite woman became the great-grandmother of the greatest king of Israel, King David. And what's even greater is that through a family, the Messiah will be born to save the world. And this is what we are talking about, even greater than Boaz, their son Obed, grandson Jesse, great-grandson David. What is the greatest? It's through a family, through Ruth's family. The Messiah will be born to save the world. Jesus was going to come through this family. A young Moabite girl was named in the genealogy of Jesus Christ, and we can see her name in the genealogy of Jesus Christ in the book of Matthew in the New Testament. Ruth's name is in there. We see Jesus Christ as a kinsman redeemer in the book of Ruth. So you want to know, what is the book of Ruth about? It's Jesus Christ, the kinsman redeemer. Salvation for the world promised from the book of Genesis came through this family. It's a bigger story than just a few chapters. It links all the way from the book of Genesis, the offspring, to the New Testament where Jesus Christ arrives. Ruth is a link in that story. You may have lost everything, but if you have salvation, the salvation of God, you lost nothing. By God's grace, you have gained everything. And that is the providence of God. That is the providence of God. Let us bow our heads in prayer. Father, we are truly grateful for this book, a small book, but a major story. A story bigger than we could even imagine. Because you are our kinsman redeemer, and we are truly thankful that the way you worked out these times in history, bringing in a Moabite woman, as she could be related to the greatest king of Israel, through whom the Messiah had come through. We are truly grateful, Lord, for this book is truly a light at the end of the tunnel that we could see. And it's your goodness, your grace to us. And we are truly grateful in Jesus' name. Amen.